Welcome to the 39th episode of Watercooler Wednesday. That's crazy. I was counting the episodes up. I'm like, we're really getting close to a real milestone. And so I'm so excited to have Simon Anderson here today. Simon is a good friend, a colleague. We're in a speakers mastermind group together, and every conversation I have with Simon leaves me mesmerized. It sometimes frightened, sometimes excited, but always mesmerized. Now, to understand how much, like what Simon says, just blows my mind. Um, Yesterday, I was on the computer with my 15-year-old son, helping him out with some homework, and he needed help with like math homework, and I don't do math. So we pulled up a YouTube video, and all of these commercials kept coming on. And I said to him, "Why are there so many commercials?" And he looked at me and rolled his eyes. He's like, "Dad, commercials? They're ads." And so I am a luddite. Technology is not my friend. I don't keep up with this stuff. What's so amazing about Simon is he can show you where we're trending. He can show you the future. He can introduce you to technologies and make it applicable and understandable, even for someone like me. So I thought this is a resource that I need to share, and I need to share it with the HR community that is going through so much change so quickly, and we know that we're just seeing the beginning of it. So that's why I'm so excited to have Simon here with us here today. Here's the part that we scripted out. My guest today, that's what I really felt. This is what we scripted. My guest today is Simon Anderson. Simon is a futurist and applied foresight speaker and the co-author of the award-winning book, Foresight 2020. For the last 12 years, Simon has dedicated his career to helping leaders around the world be future ready, and through his keynotes, workshops, and writing, Simon is here today to share his research and insights on the future of work and how HR professionals can be future ready. Cool. So I gave both descriptions. Either way, very excited to have you here, Simon.
Thank you, David. I'm happy to be your 39th guest here.
Yeah, so 39th episode, technically 38th guest. But so here we go. I warned you, I think like 2 minutes before we went live, about the 6 and 60. So are you ready for that?
I'm ready. Let's do
All
it.
right, this is 6 rapid fire questions. You have 60 seconds to answer all of them. I'm automatically putting an asterisk by it because it might take me 60 seconds to ask you one of these rapid fire questions. You'll see.
Okay. Get my mind ready for this. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, Simon, what is the one thing from the pandemic that you would like to see stick around well beyond 2023?
The knowledge that things can change very, very quickly and things that we once thought were impossible might not be impossible. And we have to have that mindset going into the future.
Oh, love it. When you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to reset and recharge?
Uh, Go to one of the amazing parks in Minnesota.
Yeah, you said you've been to like 50% of them. That's amazing.
The state
Um,
parks, yeah, or a regional park too, yeah.
awesome. You travel a lot for work and pleasure. What's the craziest thing you've ever done on your travels?
I did wingsuiting on my 40th birthday, and the only place you can do indoor wingsuiting in Sweden, and it was unbelievable. And you put VR goggles on, and you're literally flying in the squirrel suit with VR goggles on, and it's crazy. So that
Wow,
was,
I love
yeah.
it. So during some of our conversations, you seem to have like the insight of not just a futurist, but literally a visitor from the future. I know that some of your predictions keep you up at night because you've shared them with me and it's kept me up at night. If you were actually traveling back to us from a dystopian future, you need to get the people from 2023 to change one thing to prevent that future from becoming a reality. You scribble something on a cardboard sign, head to the nearest busy highway, and start waving the sign for people to read. What did you write on that sign?
What made you successful in the past does not guarantee your success in the future.
Wow. Best piece of advice or wisdom you've ever received. That might be it.
Yeah, the best piece of advice. That's an excellent question. I'm burning through my past 60 seconds here.
Yeah.
I think you really just have to be true to yourself, and in the end, no one else really cares. So you just have to be true to yourself, and sometimes the more opposition you get, the more you're on the right path. I guess would be the advice you get, because it means you're pushing norms and
Right.
you're making people uncomfortable because they're kind of justifying why they're not doing the same thing. So I guess every major decision I made that I had the most pushback on, I think was actually ended up being the right decision. So I guess that would be the
Wow, that's really
advice.
hard advice to take, but it's so important. In 5 words or less, what's the meaning of life?
In
I
five
told you
words
you
or
get
less,
stuck on the last one.
be true to yourself.
Love it. Love it. That was the easy one. That's
Yeah.
crazy. All right. So, congratulations. Together, it was a concerted effort, but we had the longest 6 and 60 in the 39 episodes, I believe. So, but I warned you that was going to be my fault with that one question. So, everyone that's joining us live, please feel free to comment or ask your questions to Simon about the future of work, the future of HR, and we're going to try to get to all of those questions. We'd also love to hear your comments and your stories. So whether you're tuning in on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc., just drop those in the chat, and we should be able to see those and interact directly with you. If you're watching the replay, do the same thing, and we'll get back to you. We're going to be monitoring these chats for a while. So, Simon, let's start at the beginning of all this. What in the world is a futurist, and how did you become one?
Yeah, usually when I tell someone I'm a futurist, they look at me and they're like, "You're a what?" So I have to explain what I am. And my poor wife has to explain what a futurist is many times. The shorter answer is there's not really a specific way to define a futurist. It can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Uh, what I do as a futurist is I recognize how fast the world is changing. Actually, let me take a step back and tell you how I became a futurist, and that kind of explains what it is. So I was going to Florida State, getting my degrees in finance and multinational business operations. Graduated in 2010, and I wanted to work on Wall Street. And this was during the height of the Great Recession. And so I realized my career path that I had planned out for myself, working on Wall Street, was completely being upended by new technologies, by the financial crisis, high frequency trading algorithms. All these different moving pieces were completely upending my great career path I had laid out for
Yeah.
myself. And so I recognized this isn't just happening to me. It sucks, but it's not just happening to me. It's happening to a lot of other people in a lot of other industries. How can I just get rid of my Wall Street dreams and help people deal with how fast the world is changing, help them be future ready? And so I ended up looking around to say, like, is this a career? Like, who's doing something like this? Who's helping people deal with all this rapid change we're going through in all these different industries? And I found a gentleman named Jack Aldrich, based in Minneapolis, and this is when I lived in Florida. Uh, and he was doing exactly what I thought that looked like. And so I reached out to him, and I started working with him. We ended up writing the book together. And so basically, what I do as a futurist is I help leaders, including HR professionals, be future ready. And what that means is moving beyond resilience, because resilience is not enough with how fast our world is changing. We can't just weather the storm and survive it and make it through. We have to be looking at the different challenges that are created and trying to avoid the worst of the challenges, but also looking at the opportunities that are created by rapid change. And so that's what I do as a futurist. I call myself an applied foresight speaker, an applied foresight advisor, because I'm more zoomed into specific actions you can take to be future ready, not like some futurists are more focused on more abstract, almost philosophical ideas like in the world of 2050, we're going to do this and live on Mars and all this stuff. For me, I'm very action focused. What can leaders do today? What all the challenges they have to be more ready for our fast changing future? So how can they avoid the worst of the challenges that are created by all this change? And how can they capitalize on the opportunities? So it's not just being resilient, it's being future ready. And I think that's really where my value comes in as a futurist, is helping people with specific actions they can take.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So, first of all, I was thinking about all of the people who have graduated within the past couple of years who probably heard your story about graduating during the Great Recession, and they're thinking, wow, that sounds extremely familiar. to graduating in the midst of a pandemic. So it's sort of history repeating itself. We're always changing, but it seems like it speeds up at these specific times. I love what you're saying about resilience not being enough. In a way, there's sort of like post traumatic stress, and then there's resilience where you bounce
Hmm.
back. You know, post traumatic stress, you're sort of damaged. Resilience, you bounce back. And then there's post traumatic growth where you actually learn lessons from the trauma, from the big impactful change that you're going through, and you use it to bring you into the future. So I guess that answers the question as to why we need futurists and why we should be looking into the future and not focusing on just now. You even wrote it on your sign when you said, what was it that you said? You said uh, that you're, what did you say? You said it so
Yeah,
much
what
yesterday.
made you successful in the past does not guarantee your success in the future.
Right, right. And so that's why to remain competitive, we need to be changing. So I really appreciate all of that. So let's talk about this future of work, and HR's part in this, and how HR is going to be changing. Um, so since 2020, we had the Great Resignation, we had quiet quitting. A lot of these things were just exacerbated, old things like just exacerbated and becoming part of, the zeitgeist, I guess. Um, then we had the subreddit uh, anti-work becoming the fastest growing discussion board on the internet, as employees became disillusioned with work, and we have employers being disillusioned with their employees, and really starting to become overwhelmingly frustrated with trying to retain or even attract
Hmm.
like good employees. So all of this is happening right now. Where does this go? Like, where does it end?
That's a that's a big question there, David. uh, yeah, we had this fast forward digital transformation where all these different trends that were kind of at the edges, like work from home, e-commerce. I mean, these are all things that were already happening, but they just got massively ramped up really, really quickly. And that's why I'm so glad that you invited me to talk about the future of HR today, because this has been HR professionals are getting hit from every direction with all these changes. In fact, PayScale had a survey a couple of months ago that two of the top 10 careers most likely to quit are in HR, specialists and assistants. So HR professionals are getting hit from every direction, and it is really tough for them right now with how fast these things are changing. So we're not going back to the world we used to live in. People, people that are now working from home that love it for a variety of reasons, uh, maybe aren't going to be looking for jobs that are not work from home in the future.
Mhm.
A lot of these new technologies that we've ramped up very quickly. I mean, look at everyone using Zoom now and using these different telecommunication platforms that are completely comfortable with it that might have never tried it for many more years had the pandemic not happened. Uh, I think what really going forward, we're just going to be in a time of rapid ongoing change with these cycles compressing smaller and smaller. So the changes are happening faster and faster.
Right.
I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And unfortunately, that's not what a lot of people want to hear. They want to hear, once we get fully through the pandemic, everything's back to normal. We'll go back to how we used to work. A lot of managers, especially older managers, are be like, everyone's going to come back in the office 5 days a week. It's going to be just like the old days. We have passed that point, the tipping point. We're no longer going to be going back to business as usual post pandemic.
So you have like just recently Disney's calling their people back to the office, right? Like at least 4 days a week. And then City is pulling their underperformers back to the office, which that's got to be that's an interesting call to make so publicly, because if you know somebody that
Yeah,
works for City and suddenly they're going back to the office, now we all know
yeah.
why. That's I question their choices there. Um, but we've been struggling with this work from home, and I think a lot of it is this. How do we define culture? What is culture? Is culture the same as we used to define it. And then a lot of it is just the technical know-how of managing remote and hybrid workforces. Can you speak to that? Like, how do we fix this? How does HR and other leadership within the organization, what steps can they take to actually retain their people, and actually like sort of spread that culture, or properly manage their people when they're some of them are on location and some are not.
Yeah, that's an extremely challenging problem. A great example of this shift is with Apple. You know, they have their $5 billion spaceship campus, and back when I think it was April of 2022, they first tried to bring people back, and their employees like revolted. They didn't want to come back to this amazing, like one of the best places to work in the whole world. Even they didn't want to come back. So you ask everyone else like that doesn't have a spaceship campus, what if it's already happening at Apple. Um, so yeah, the culture thing is really interesting. So this really speaks to the generational divide as well with like digital natives and digital immigrants. When you have like millennials and Gen Zs, especially younger millennials, and their perspectives on how the world works and how work happens, versus maybe some of the people in management who are almost inherently older just because it took longer to get up to those positions. So you have kind of this corner office mentality of someone who is used to just working super hard. You know, it's called work for a reason because it sucks and you just have to go and do it and work long hours to move up. And work-life balance doesn't exist. You know, you just got to work, work, work. And this feeling that they're having like of loss of control when all their employees are remote now, or a lot of their employees are remote. And then you have the other side of it with younger generations who this they've had their eyes kind of opened up of what they should be getting from their employer and how disposable the employers feel they are. They can this whole idea of having this loyalty to companies just went out the window when people, especially now, are laying off thousands of people who had worked there for many years. So I think the whole culture piece really starts in onboarding. That is a piece that I think businesses really drop the ball on over and over and over again. People are just kind of brought into a company and they have, they don't know how their work impacts the mission of the company. The company's mission might not resonate with them at all. Um, and so I think really strong onboarding is the first piece of that. And the other thing is, before I go into a long speech about this, think of, I talked about generational perspectives. Think if you're a Gen Z person and you're used to constant feedback all the time in your life. So you're on social media, you always get, you put something out there on TikTok, wherever you instantly get likes and, replies and all kinds of feedback constantly. You start your new job, maybe have like a bad onboarding process. You get your laptop and here's your email login and here's some courses you have to go through online. And then you're expected to wait for a year to get your annual review to see how you did. That's like a lifetime to someone who's used to just constant feedback all the time. So that's a huge question, but those are just a couple things to touch on. But I think the onboarding piece is really, really important to starting that culture in a remote environment.
Wow. So it happened to be that in 2019, I was studying virtual teams. So I had no idea
Nice.
that was on the precipice of this, right? And one of the things that you'd find throughout the literature on virtual teams was that when you form them, they should be formed in person so that you could build trust and familiarity and build a stronger team, and then everybody goes their separate ways. And there's so much research to back this up. Now people are being onboarded virtually and remain virtual, and it's like two people in the office may have never met each other. But what I also know is that in 2020 that they had the largest amount of new technology coming out for virtual collaboration sort of tools, right? They had the most patents ever, or something like that, on these sorts of tools for virtual communication and collaboration. Is there anything out there that we might not be utilizing yet, or something on the forefront, or something that you found really works in terms of that getting that sort of in-person feel or as close to it as possible?
Yeah, sitting on Zoom calls all day with two-dimensional, just floating heads of people. is, I mean, our brains naturally need to have people, we need to know where they are in space compared to us. Just it's just like a natural need we have, so we can kind of know where they are, know how they're moving, see their gestures, not just what they're saying and not just their heads. So, we heard about Meta with Facebook changing their name to Meta with virtual reality. They were completely all in their Horizons workplaces and all these different virtual reality and augmented reality tools. Currently, I mean, when Mark Zuckerberg put his picture up in the first Horizons workplace, it looked like worse than a Wii game from like 2005, and everyone's like, "This is not the future of collaboration." um, but I think we're kind of judging some of these tools by the brick phone version, like the first cell phones that were super heavy, that had like 30-minute batteries. So I think zooming out a little bit, if we can have glasses that are like regular glasses that actually allow us to have like get more of a feeling of 3D space with our like collaborating with coworkers, maybe have a shared platform or a shared board that we can write on, or a 3D model we can all interact with in space. We're not there yet, certainly. I mean, there's been massive layoffs in VR and augmented reality in the last even couple months. I think that's going to be something that's going to be really important in a few years. And just at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show earlier in January, ASUS showed off their laptop using spatial technology that has like 3D glasses-free displays, and so you can kind of get that sense of space. So I think we'll be relying more on those kind of tools, but that is certainly not something you're going to go buy tomorrow. And the headsets are still heavy; they're still maybe just one step past brick phone. So I don't see the average person who's working all day in the office or at their home wearing these giant heavy headsets that they have to keep recharging, and
Right.
it looks like playing in a Wii game. But I definitely can see how that's going to be part of our collaborative future, because we can't just keep looking at this Zoom fatigue from looking at 2D people all day. And for the digital immigrants, like the Brady Bunch, and they used to have like the nine,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't do that all day and feel like that sense of collaboration you feel in person.
Right. So, but when we talk about that though, is that going to be popular with employees? Is it going to be acceptable to employees? How many of you that are watching right now, just put a yes or a thumbs up in the box if you've seen this. But how many of you personally, or you see your teams resist turning on their cameras in a Zoom meeting? It's almost like, give me the business case for that, right? Like, I am
Mm-hmm.
supplying you with the work product, and therefore I don't need to get dressed and do my hair and have everybody seeing what's happening in my house, like in order to get the work done. And so if we create this other thing, like, yeah, put on your glasses, or right now like a helmet, like, are we gonna get buy-in for that, or is work already becoming too, or maybe, I mean, that's my own bias saying too transactional, but is it becoming transactional, much more transactional now, to the extent that maybe there's no longer an overwhelming interest in building community with the people that we work with?
That's an excellent point. It's going to be a mix, I think. There's going to be a lot more transactional, and even just putting teams together, maybe that don't even work for the company, like temporary employees, essentially, almost like making a movie where you bring everyone together, you finish the product, and everyone goes their own ways. You have experts in different areas. So that's going to be a big part of it, I think. The other piece is, once the technologies become good enough that they're actually adding something it actually makes it easier and better to interact this way, then people will, they can't just do it because they're forced to do it. That's going to have to add something make it better in some way.
Right, right. And maybe the attraction of the technology will do that for some employees, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe not all of them. Brittany said, "Yep, I see this a lot with evening trainings. I often just take away the awkwardness, unknown at the beginning, to invite that, unless I need to see them for some reason." So, in other words, you're saying to invite them to turn off the screen. And Dina Schwartz says, "I believe the success of such innovations are limited to very limited and particular industry realms. Can we address innovations to stabilize the workforce for frontline employees?" That's a great question. So you have these employees who are the frontline heroes, or whatever we started calling them, which I think at this
Yeah.
point is received as well as calling work a family or saying we value
Yeah.
diversity here when it's clear that you don't. You know, so it's sort of like these buzzword things. Um, what does the future look like for those frontline employees? And on the flip side, if I could add, there's a lot of technology in the works to replace some percentage of those frontline employees, isn't there? What does that look like? Are we going to have those employees working the front lines? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, the automation is the pandemic, one of those trends at the edges that got completely accelerated because of lack of workers and also because of cost workers and just health concerns and all these additional things. In fact, we lost during the pandemic, I think it was like 2.6 of the workforce was reduced because of the pandemic, either from disability or from just dying. They're no longer in the workforce. And in December, 1.5 million people missed work because they were sick, which is way above the average. So that those kind of trends really push the automation piece, both in physical, like robots at restaurants, like Flippy making burgers at White Castle, or automation tools like ChatGPT, which is all over the internet now, and different writing tools and voice tools. Um, yeah, so the frontline, anyone physically needs to show up and service others, not just healthcare.
Right. So anybody who needs to be physically there. And which has also created, I know organizations that I've worked with on these types of issues with going work from home, blended environments, there's like this equity issue as well. When it becomes an option for some people and not others, how do you keep the people in the industries where they have to keep showing up, right? Like and
Yeah,
happy.
especially when for a while they were at great danger having to show up, and then all the executives got to work from home, and people, at the grocery store and the different stores were dealing with customers all day long.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, the automation piece is huge, and that's just going to continue to ramp up, I think. And at the same time that employees are recognizing their value and wanting to be treated better by their employers, the unfortunate side effect of that is the opportunity cost for automating their positions or parts of what they do. It just gets more and more worth it to automate what pieces of what they do. In fact, in Texas, we had the first fully automated McDonald's for customer facing employees open up, where you just enter it up, you enter your order, and you pull up, the thing comes through the little chute, and it's you never even see an actual person the entire transaction. Um, so as employees recognize their worth and get sick of getting treated so poorly by employers, the unfortunate side effect is you're ramping up the employers to want to automate what they do. Uh,
Yeah. So can
so yeah,
we, yeah, go ahead.
no,
Oh,
just on that topic, I want to just mention one thing that when just since we are talking about automation, as a futurist, people always ask me, like, oh, is it replacing jobs? Is it gonna like get rid of all these different positions? And I think the key misunderstanding, both with physical robotics and with software, is that it's not replacing jobs one for one. It's taking, so let's say you're an HR professional, and let's say there's 120 different things, sub functions to do with your job throughout the week. It's not fully replacing an HR professional. It's taking individual slices of what they do, and then you have to keep recombining what's left to just the human only job function. So people are expected to do more and more with the automation tools because pieces of what they're doing are being automated, not one for one wholesale replacement. And I think that's really important to consider going into the future for HR specialists, both for their own careers and for the people that they're hiring.
so does this mean that there's going to be more opportunity for HR, the people who are left in HR? Because if you're automating big chunks of it, then I would think that there'd be less people within HR. But is this going to provide the opportunity for HR to truly start functioning more on the culture side, the strategy side, and maybe even the analytics side? Um, really looking at workforce
Mhm.
strategy and planning and as well as culture engagement, retention sort of things. Uh, as we can cut back on some of the other functions.
Yeah, if you can get rid of some of the redundant or the repetitive work and some of the things that don't really, they add value, but it can be, once it can be automated, they can, like you said, refocus on more of the human aspects and the humans experiencing technology and the corporate culture and employee wellness, better onboarding programs. Absolutely. Uh, But then you also, as you add these new technologies, you also have to look at what additional work do these new technologies bring in for the HR specialists too, or HR professionals trying to either implement some new system in their company, or let's say they have a new onboarding tool, some new cloud-based platform, and trying to integrate that with other systems. So it's always this give and take. Like the automation can make their work easier and let them focus on other things, but it also creates its own work in some respects as well.
Right. And then you've got the technical change with all this new technology. And too often what gets overlooked is the actual change management, with workflow and with collaboration and communication, the human process interventions, and the human resource interventions in terms of aligning your performance management system up with the new things that you're trying to reward, and motivate people toward. Um, so, like, there are so many changes that are happening within organizations now and into the future, but these other aspects do get overlooked. So, as a futurist, when you're looking at this, how do you get organizations to see this full picture? The technology side and the human side, how much can those be separated?
Yeah, and in the end, we're just humans experiencing technology, and we have to be able to understand the value of the new technology, uh, get over our unconscious and conscious biases as far as why we think something won't work because been doing something for 25 years and we've always been successful. Why try to change to this new system or new platform or new process or whatever? Um, that's a huge struggle as a futurist is helping people first understand the need for change and how it benefits them and how it's not just one more thing they have to do. Um, and then really getting them on board with like the mindset piece of, okay, these are some new opportunities that are being created. These are some challenges that are being created. How can I think about this differently? And I've got my framework that I use, my 3A thinking framework, attention, anticipation, action, that I use to help people kind of wrap their heads around trying to have this futurist mindset with how fast the world is changing.
Yeah, can you run through that model for us real quick?
Yeah, so it starts with attention. So basically, everyone is so busy that we've got a million things going on. And as you know, with HR professionals, I mean, the burnout that's, your area of expertise, one of them. It's just huge with HR people because they're dealing with so much right now. So trying to ask them to take a step back and look at the edges and pay attention to some of these things that aren't currently demanding their attention, that can be really difficult when you already have so much on your plate, so many responsibilities. But it's critically important to get that preview of what's coming so you can do something about it now. And that's where we move to anticipation. So if you're paying attention, let's say, I've been talking to my clients for a long time about these writing tools like ChatGPT, for example, and the previous iterations of things like that. So if I bring attention to that, then they can begin anticipating, okay, what then? If this is something that's happening, it's not currently impacting me, but what if this becomes like a major thing in my work, in my industry or in my company? What then? How could that impact my career? How could that impact my employees, my team, my company culture, my onboarding, whatever aspect it could impact. And then finally, once you're paying attention and anticipating, what actions could I take today if this future were to become a reality? What can I do now while there's still time to do something about it? Uh, it goes back to that beyond resilience piece. You can't just continually get blindsided by these new changes and react to them and react and react to them. If you take action when you're still have time, you can be a lot better positioned for when it actually does hit your industry.
Right, right. So some of these technologies, like selection tools, a lot of it, a lot of these tools are meant to automate and to free up our time so we can work on other things. Right. I mean, that's sort of what technology is about. And but there's, it seems like a mixed bag. Some of these things seem to be working toward improving, diversity, equity, inclusion, and other technologies seem to maybe be moving us in the wrong direction, in terms of diversity and equity, in a big way. Where are we going with that? Because within that DEI framework, so much seems to be shifting, in terms of how work from home impacted different people differently and different groups of people differently, in the way that women were so much more likely to leave the workforce during the pandemic and still say that they're looking for to leave their career. in large numbers. Uh, how is this all impacting also generationally? You had so many people retiring early, and
Mhm.
how is this impacting that diversity in all of its forms? These technologies in terms of selection and other considerations that HR might want to take when they're implementing these technologies.
Yeah, like all these new tools for what, like an employer or employee will do a video, they'll answer questions for an interview like
Hmm.
via video and then submit it, and then the AI picks like the top 1% and then forwards those on to an actual HR human.
Right.
Um, but even things like you mentioned, like when you have resumes submitted with no names or any kind of identifying information, all of a sudden it really changes who gets hired. It just shows all the biases, even maybe people who have been through trainings and think they don't have those biases.
Right.
But these tools are only as good as the data that they've been trained on. And so some tools improve diversity, increasing diversity in employers, and then some make it worse depending on the data sets that they have. The other thing is once you hire people, as much as employers love to say we love diversity and we want to have, you have to walk the walk. You can't just, say the cool tagline that you're supposed to say.
Right.
Um, and this just happens over and over and over again. For example, even just getting pronouncing someone's name correctly, that's like the smallest, tiniest little step you can take as a manager. And I have heard over and over and over again that managers don't even take the time to learn their employee's name correctly because it's a little bit hard for them to say. If you're an employee, I don't care what they're saying about diversity and inclusion. If you don't even take time to pronounce my name correctly because it's a little bit different than your native language, that just tells me everything I need to know about this organization, and I don't want to work there. So even little things like that can make a huge difference. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you say it's only as good as the data that's put in there. And while as humans we have biases, humans are creating this technology and they're certainly inputting the data into the technology. And so we really have to be careful with that. What about this concept of talent development? I know that throughout the Great Resignation, one of the um, uh, largest pieces of largest reasons given for leaving an organization was the stagnation, right? That they didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
like they were growing within the organization or having development opportunities. And a lot of organizations did sort of press pause on that during the pandemic. What does this look like in a world where we are so clearly going to have to retool people and move some jobs around and reskill people? What is what does this talent development look like, and what is it going to look like going forward with the technology that's being introduced?
Yeah, as these cycles compress and the world changes faster and faster, new tools like mix and match and speed each other up, um, that we're having an increasing disconnect between what's being taught in the universities and what's needed in the market. There's the disconnect between what people are leaving school with and what the market needs, and I think that disconnect's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So that not only we have to look at different ways to hire, but also, like you mentioned, different ways to train, and treating employees like they're treat the employee like you're trying to help them grow as an employee, not just an employee of your company. I think that's critical to retaining employees. Like we're investing in you as an employee to make you more valuable in the market, not just more valuable to my company. And that can be with different training tools and not relying on old tools. Having there's so many opportunities now to learn so many different so many different certifications and all these different platforms that we can use now that can help employees level up. So it could even be internally with sales enablement, or you can give them a budget to go to a conference or go to like an outside certification, maybe even one that does not directly improve their performance in your company, but shows them you value them as an employee and you're trying to help them increase their marketability long term. I think that goes a long way to retention. One last kind of related piece to that is this whole idea of shifting away from HR being kind of like protecting the company legally from any kind of lawsuits and people filing for unemployment and things like that, to HR really focused on creating a better personalized employee experience to increase retention and attracting employees. So that can be everything from a la carte benefits, where you can kind of, you have a certain budget for your benefits and you can pick what fits you the best. Maybe it's childcare, you want more of that. Maybe you don't need healthcare because your spouse already has it. You can kind of move those around. It can be real-time payment, especially in lower pay, where you're getting um, you're getting paid as you work. There's a lot like daily pay, a lot of companies like that now, instead of waiting for an antiquated payroll system to direct deposit every 2 weeks or whatever. And again, like I mentioned, a budget for employee improvement, for credentials, classes, anything else that can improve their marketability as an employee.
Yeah, I forget the quote, so I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say it, but something along the lines of, um, if you don't train your employees so that they won't leave, they will leave. I told you I'm going to butcher it. Forget it. We'll edit that on the other end.
In the live feed, yeah.
Right, right. But basically, you want to train your employees to the extent that they can leave. That's the only way to retain them, ironically,
Mhm.
and get the most out of them when they're with you. So we talk a lot about the technology. As a futurist, you also look at potential policy and other outside forces that are impacting the workforce or may come to impact the workforce. I'm thinking about this cultural shift toward these demands for wellness and well-being within the workplace, right? And this, simultaneous with COVID, this pandemic of burnout and how negatively that's impacted not just individual organizations, but us as a society. Um, do you foresee anything coming down the pipeline potentially where these things might start being regulated? And if so, is there something that organizations can get behind now in terms of their benefits to be ahead of the curve? And if not, there's probably a major interest even without any sort of regulation for companies to be doing better in this. Are there any recommendations on what HR could be pushing for?
Yeah, I think market demand will be way ahead of any kind of bureaucratic or political like regulations that come into place. I think that just what workers are demanding already is going to be way in front of any kind of political regulation. We look at, and I recently spoke to a group of healthcare CEOs, mental health CEOs that had mental health facilities around the country, and so I did quite a bit of research for that event, and it is incredible what we're seeing with Gen Z and the extreme mental health struggles they're going through right now. One of the positive things with the pandemic is I feel like we're normalizing mental health challenges, and we're saying this is a common experience. This is not something to be ashamed of or have a stigma attached to. This is something we should address. Um, and I think as employers, mental health and employee wellness is becoming a metric that you're measuring. It's not just a nice to have or part of our mission statement that we want everyone to be happy and have good mental health. It actually becomes a metric by which you measure the success of the company. How is the mental health of my employees? What tools and what resources are we giving them to address those challenges? And how do they rate their wellness? How do they feel about their lives outside of work and how work is impacting their personal lives? So I think just the market demand is going to push ahead of that. And we also look at the generational trends. By 2030, all baby boomers will be 65 years old or older. We already have, by 2016, the majority of the workforce was already millennials, and now Gen Z is entering the workforce. So we have a very different generational perspective coming in, where a lot of the corner office mentality, I call it, that a lot of older generations had, is moving completely out of management and retiring, and we're bringing people with different perspectives, and I think that's going to be a big push to some of these changes as well.
Yeah, yeah. You also made me think in terms of normalizing mental health challenges. One of the promising things that I've been seeing being normalized and focused on a little bit more recently is neurodiversity.
Hmm.
Di Cirolo was a guest of the show, and I'm gonna try to get her back to talk about specifically neurodiversity. She posts often um, as a professional with ADHD, and every time she posts, I think she's talking directly about me, and I love it. And thinking about these things in different ways instead of, and so much of this is so related to the individualization that you've spoken about, like the individualization of benefits, but also understanding the individual, um, uh, you know, things that each individual employee brings to the company. I
Hmm.
think I think is a powerful trend that I've been noticing, and I hope is going to stick around.
I think it's going to have to be just out of market demand when such a large percentage of the employees applying for jobs are neurodiverse or have different, just are different than what they would consider that, which never even existed, but like the regular employee, which didn't even ever really exist.
Right,
Everyone always had these different things that just wasn't recognized as much.
right,
Um, and just realizing people don't necessarily have to be 9 to 5 Monday through Friday to be a really effective employee.
mm, right, right. And so we talked about sort of automation. We talked about that as sort of like this alternative to um, uh, putting in all the work that it takes with employees that now dare to have demands, right? And I'm not trying to belittle that, but when you think about it, there is like it's strange that this is a new concept, but it is a challenging concept, and so organizations can get better at meeting those demands and exceeding those demands. They could get better at implementing technologies so that they're less reliant on that workforce. Then there's this third piece of moving further toward a gig economy. We just saw these mass layoffs yet again start hitting organizations like Microsoft, like Amazon. And I guess the question is that like sort of the third spoke there, the third option, that we start moving away from these traditional employees that we have to take care of, et cetera, and move toward just the gig economy of a partnership. You come in to do this thing, and when our job is done or we can't afford you anymore, you go on your way. Is that the next frontier of this as well?
The Uberization of XYZ when you have, yeah, people just,
Yeah. And
I
then
mean,
and then that could introduce a lot of issues too with who's a contractor and who's not, right? Which we already see.
unfortunately, yeah, a lot of times when you move to that model, employee abuses are not far behind where they don't have healthcare, they have no stability, which is really on people's minds right now with how fast people are getting laid off. And it's always in the news on this looming recession we keep hearing about, which hasn't fully really materialized. But um, yeah, I think we will see more of that. And it was happening even pre-pandemic, but um, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. I mean, I think it can be a good thing for people who need extreme flexibility and want to work maybe a bunch of different roles, a bunch of different companies. I mean, as speakers, we kind of already been living this model for a long time where we just come in and
Right.
speak and we go on to the next thing. But there's going to have to be some guardrails and some way to protect employees, which again, I don't rely on the government to do that just because there's so many challenges even at the state level. And so I think it is happening and it will continue to happen, but I don't necessarily see that as a net positive for the workforce in general, just because I think employees will take advantage. And then at the same time, they're adding these automation tools in. At any time they can add an automation tool in, it's just going to keep supplementing the workforce. And the challenging thing that a lot of people aren't recognizing is this technology, all these different automation tools we have, are the worst they'll ever be right now.
Hmm.
They are only going to get better and better and better and better. So we can't even just pretend like, okay, now we have this, it's just going to be like this going forward. No, these things are compressing and getting better so fast that this disconnect between the humans experiencing it and then the tools that are available that large corporations can employ is going to get more and more problematic as we move forward.
Right. So right now we're kind of in the dial-up internet, the AOL or Prodigy kind of stage of this. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it depends on the technology, but I think, but what's happening is these technologies are not advancing in a vacuum. They're mixing and remixing and accelerating each other. And so that's where it gets really hard to imagine these exponential gains in these different areas, just because we're not naturally made to think like that. Our brains don't work that way. We think very linearly. And so it's very difficult to imagine 5 years from now when we have GPT-6 or whatever and indistinguishable, technology or technology indistinguishable from humans in a lot of different sub-functions of your job. That creates a whole new world that we have to try to live in. And anyways, not to go too dark on you here, but I mean, I think that's something we really need to start thinking about.
So I've still got pages of notes of things I wanted to talk to you about, but I promised you that we'd start shutting it down around now. But I was wondering, I wanted to put the ball in your court here. We have an HR director viewing this right now. They are experiencing all of the challenges that most of us are experiencing with the turnover, the lack of retention, the difficulty finding people, this sort of tug of war between work from home and be in the office, trying to define culture. They've got this whole bag of problems. And like you said, this is just the beginning of this journey for us. What is your recommendation for them? What can they do today to get on the right side of this or start moving in that direction?
Yeah, and I don't mean to make light of any of these challenges with the way I'm just, I feel like I'm sharing the things that I think are important, but I'm not trying to make light of these real world challenges that these different technologies are creating. So I absolutely recognize that. For the HR director, it starts with mindset. Just recognize that the world is very different now. And I'm sure this is something they're already thinking about, but the world is different now. It's not going to go back to what it was before, and it's going to continue to get different faster with these new technologies that are coming out. So as far as attracting and retaining employees, the onboarding piece is really, really critical for the retention side of it. Employee flexibility and personalized employee experience. If you can do a la carte benefits, even partially, that can be a huge way to retain people. Treating the employees as in helping the employees gain their value in the overall market, not just what they can do for your company, is a huge piece of that with sales enablement, with variable trainings, things like that, where they have some time to kind of improve themselves in the market. But other than that, I mean, just it really starts with the mentality that things are changing very quickly. We have to unlearn some of these previous practices that we had of the way the world works, and just recognize how quickly it's changing and try to use some of these tools that are being created to take advantage of some of these opportunities, not just get run over by them, I guess. So in the short answer, I don't have a great answer for that. It is very challenging, but I think it really does start with the mindset piece.
Yeah, and that individualization is part of why it's so difficult to give a right answer. It's got to be individualized for the organization, but also at the employee level. And when you talk about benefits, my mind goes to thinking of that through the lens of total rewards. That we're not just talking about, do I offer this type of healthcare or whatnot or insurance, but we're talking about all of it. Flexibility is a benefit, right? And so to individualize that while maintaining and building and maybe rebuilding your culture is a challenge that every organization is facing right now. But back to your model, which if you could share that with us one more time.
My 3A thinking: attention, anticipation, and action.
Attention, anticipation, and action.
So here's a quick thing you can do to kind of help you stay in this mindset. I always recommend to my clients that they take at least once per week and schedule a future 15. So put 15 minutes on your calendar every week where you apply this 3A thinking model. So go on, some websites you might not look at usually, like Tech Review or Engadget or some kind of trends or technology website that maybe you wouldn't visit within your normal workday. Typically, find some new trend or technology. Think, wow, okay, I'm paying attention to this. What can I anticipate with this? How could this impact my career, my company, my industry? And then what actions can I take if this is becoming a reality? If this thing that's currently at the edges is going to be like the next big thing, what actions can I take today to be ready for that future? Even those 15 minutes every week can really shift your mindset and help you be a lot more future ready. The other thing you can do is put it on your calendar when you're busiest. Let's say Monday at 10 a.m. you're super busy each week typically. Drop your future 15 during your busiest part of the week, because you're signaling to yourself and to your employees, like, thinking about the future is so important. I'm making it a priority. Like, this is that important. It's not something I'm just going to bump to next week.
Wow, I absolutely love that idea. And I'll one up you. When they're looking for their reading, please connect with Simon. He's on some sort of future Twitter thing. That's not Twitter. So I've never heard of it until right before we went live. But he's on this thing. You should find him on there. Start a conversation on LinkedIn. If you lift your phone up and hover right over his QR code, you will be able to go directly to Simon's website and learn more about him and whether you're interested in bringing him in for a speaking engagement or for consultation or whatnot. What other ways can they connect with you and learn more about the very scary yet exciting future?
Yeah, the new Twitter you talked about is post.news. And so I'm post.news/speaker. My username is speaker on there. It's a great new platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love talking about this kind of stuff. So even if you wanted to say, hey, I just saw this, quantum computing, how could this impact my industry, whatever, I love talking about this kind of stuff. So please reach out. I'm happy to discuss. Yeah, LinkedIn and my website and post.news/speaker are the best ways to connect.
Yeah, please connect to Simon. He is an incredible resource. If you hover over my QR code over there, this is reverse over there. I would love for you to connect with me as well. You can go on there and see my link tree and even see what I'm reading right now. But I also want to encourage you strongly to tune in Monday, February 20th. This is not the water cooler, but it is a brand new series in a brand new style where there are 4 IO psychology consultants, Brittany Eisenman, Chanel Winslow, Deborah Colazzo, and me, David Shar. We are going to have a debate format live on LinkedIn where you'll be able to chime in, ask questions, challenge us, let us know your thoughts on hard-hitting issues of today and tomorrow. So tune in for our first one, February 20th, where we'll talk about whether there's a right way to lay people off, which is obviously a big topic right now. You can use this QR code right there in the corner, right here, to follow us on our brand new LinkedIn page. Simon, thank you so much for being here today and for dropping your wisdom and your foresight. Like I said, you're really like a being from the future come down to guide us. And we've all learned the lesson. Don't rely on what's happened or what you've known in the past for the future. Things are changing rapidly. And it's good that we have people like Simon out there that are sort of forecasting this for us and reminding us of what's to come.
Thanks, David. It's great to talk with you again.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you're watching the replay, say hi. And we will talk to you next time. We'll be back water cooler in 2 weeks. And then on the 20th, we have our brand new series focusing on, is there a right way to lay people off?